everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Kat. So many students ask me about advice towards the grad school and how I can publish multiple publications in the few years in the grad school and working towards problems regarding to complicated biology questions in the neuroscience and genetics field. So I actually want to use this video to talk about some points that I think really important for surviving and thriving in the grad school. So let's get started. So first of all, I think the classes are really important because these are the foundations of your knowledge that are required in the grad school. I think many students don't take class seriously. So I will say I had very similar mindsets at the very beginning of my grad school because I would imagine, oh, I don't have to know this technique that I learned from molecular biology because I might never use this in the lab, right? So I think if you only think from the knowledge perspective, you will be like, yeah, I will just Google this. However, this is not only about knowledge, it is also about the thinking process behind it. So the classes in the grad school, it should not only be memorizing. You have to also think about, oh, what kind of experiments did they do to figure out, let's say, this component of the signaling pathway that are very important for neurodevelopment. Okay, so I think those kind of thinking process behind it are way more important than memorizing every single component in 10 different kind of pathways. So what I remember was back in grad school, we have the qualifying exam, which one is knowledge-based and one is basically towards your thesis. So to prepare for my knowledge exam, at the beginning, it was really hard for me to memorize every single thing that was taught in the class because I'm just very bad at memorizing things. However, prepping the qualifying exam with my friend, who was actually really all about understanding the logic behind it, knowing all the experiments that are designed towards answering specific questions, then I feel like, oh, it's actually much more interesting to learn that. And at the same time, you also know, okay, so when you have one problem, what kind of experiment you can design, which can also help you later on in the lab for your thesis as well. So that's why now I advise students to really take classes seriously, not just for the scores. It is fine that you don't get straight A, okay, I'm not a straight A student, because I think more importantly is you enjoy classes that can really help you to design experiment later for your thesis work, as well as thinking out of the box for your project later as well. That's why I think classes are very important, and of course, you have to enjoy it, and one way to enjoy learning all the knowledge that are taught in the class is going back to the history and knowing how the scientists designed everything to address the specific questions at that time. The second thing is important to me is maintain the balance between the class and the lab work. It depends on your program. You might have classes spreading out through your whole, 5 years of your grad school. However, most of the program, I would say, is concentrated in the first or the second year, and then you have certain elective classes later on. In that case, especially in your first year, you really want to balance the times that you study the classes with the time that you allocate to do experiments. Experiments are flexible, however, some very time-sensitive experiments you really have to plan well. For example, you don't want to do an experiment that requires, let's say, 10 hours in the lab non-stop on a day that you also have to go to class, right? And this is a kind of extreme example, but I just want to let you know that these two are equally important in the first year or two of your grad school. So please do not use one as an excuse to avoid the other. Or, if you get a C in the class, you were like, oh, it's because I really spend a lot of time in the lab. I don't think anybody can use that as an excuse to fail your exam. The third thing I really want to emphasize is really to cultivate your critical thinking mindset, okay? This can apply to both classes, which I already talked about, as well as lab. I think as a graduate student, you are working towards your PhD degree. Getting a PhD degree doesn't mean that, oh, you just did one project or multiple projects. Having a PhD degree means that you have the ability to think independently, solve problems independently, and you can gather knowledge or information really efficiently. Those skills have to be trained in the few years that you spend in the grad school. So in order to train yourself on these skills, as well as hoping your project can work out smoothly, you really want to, take time to think how would you design this experiment in a very efficient way to solve the question that you want to ask. Instead of whenever you have a problem, you go to your PI, you go to a mentor in the lab who can be a postdoc or a senior graduate student, Instead, you should sit down, right? Read some papers, and then think about what kind of experiment it can be used to address this question first by yourself. You can, if you need to breathe some mice, you should, write out the breathing scheme by yourself. And then later, after you think about it for some time by yourself, then, you reach out to your PI or to your mentors in the lab, discuss with them, which step I can optimize. Is this a good experiment that I should be working on? And how can I optimize this experiment or this approach to address the question that you want to ask? I have seen so many students, they were given a project when they joined the lab. So they think, this project is so straightforward, so I will just do whatever the mentor told me to do. And it didn't work out. I'm gonna freak out. The worst case, they drop out the grad school after multiple times of those failure, and most of them, they struggle with their project because the mentors might leave the lab, the PI might be busy, and then they might stuck in the grad school for a long time. Alternatively, maybe they're lucky, they have a mentor that's be with them 24/7. Whenever they have questions, the mentors will be available to answer. But this means, yes, you have a sweet, comfortable 4 or 5 years in grad school, but after grad school, whatever kind of job that you're looking for requires critical thinking and quickly learning skills, as I mentioned in a couple of videos that I've told you. If you didn't learn in your grad school, if you didn't learn in a hard way in grad school, you will have to learn at some point in your job. And the worst case in grad school is you redesign an experiment, right? It might waste you a couple months, maybe, but you learned, right? And then it's not a big failure. Ultimately, everything might still work out. The worst case is you are on the job, you didn't learn this, and then you rely too much on other people, the company didn't see the value in you, then what's the consequence? You'll be fired. And then you'll be crying without knowing what was the problem. So I think grad school is a very great opportunity for you to learn the critical thinking skills and all other soft skills that you wish to learn without any substantial cost. So if you like the video so far, please like the video and subscribe because that is the best way to support me for providing you more interesting and valuable videos. So the next point I want to bring up is really seize all the opportunities to present yourself. I know, grad school is stressful and many people might be introverts. You don't feel comfortable talking to people about your project, about yourself. But I think this is really a great way to really express yourself because presentation skills is a very important skill that you should also learn in a grad school. You can be an introvert, but the great thing about being introvert is you are very passionate about your work, right? When you are by yourself, you can talk all about your project to yourself. You are your only audience. So how about, just practice multiple times at home, talk about your projects, to an invisible audience. Train yourself how to present your projects or your work towards others while now the others at home is you in a mirror. But then later, after you get comfortable with talking about your project, then step by step, you first talk to a very close friend or your family members, and then you get more comfortable about it. Then, step by step, you can present to a larger audience. And I think presentation skills is really important. There are a couple different ways to do it, which if you're interested, I can put a video together about how to present as a professional. So in brief, there are basically two different kind of presentation settings, right? One is an academic setting, and the second is layman term, just outside in an elevator, which you might heard of as an elevator pitch. So you can prepare yourself in two settings and then use different opportunities to present your project. So the next point I want to bring up is I encourage you to join different student clubs even though you're in a grad school. I think joining student organization or clubs can really help you make friends, and they can be the friends that you are both maybe interested in neuroscience, academically, but also they can be a couple friends who are also interested in alternative careers. That's where I found my friends in the consulting club, of course, now help me launch my new career as well. Furthermore, it can be just, you like hiking, join a club with everybody enjoys hiking with you, and that's a very important thing for me, and I think for most of my friends, because that's your social life. So graduate students are human beings as well, right? You need lab life, but also a social life. And I think really it's very important for you to have a work-life balance. Well, ultimately we're here, the work-life balance. Because if you burn out, there's no way that you can continue your grad school very happily. And I really wish every single person in the grad school can be happy and enjoying their scientific training. So I encourage you to join different clubs, spend time with friends on the weekend and night, having dinner with them who you found through these student organizations. Because, in this current world, it's just really hard for you to find friends other than lab members. So I think that at least is one of my ways to broaden my, network in person back then. So hopefully these tips can help you enjoy your grad school a little bit better, learn all the skills that you think that is really important. At the same time, take care of yourself, make some new friends, and I will see you in the next video.